Okay. So I'm Enric Senabre, and I work at the DIMMONS research group with Ricard and Mayo. And my main interest has to do with research methodologies, although the research group it's about economics and the impact of the social and solidarity economy in the digital and specifically in the platform economy. I'm more interested, or I have a kind of wider question about how visual language and agile ways of working with people in a research team can affect the research process itself. I had the opportunity to do the PhD with Mayo as my coordinator and my advisor. It was like the third occasion, the third opportunity, the third time I saw the train passing, and I decided to jump again. And as a PhD candidate, I've been choosing this modality of publishing in journals, and then try to make it a coherent and a kind of story that can be followed as a final report or thesis. What was very challenging in doing this, because I'm trying, like with this kind of examples, like mapping things and bringing design thinking into the research processes, is that I'm trying to do it in a action research group that is dealing also with public policies, and that has a lot of time to invest in connecting with projects, in building or contribute to building communities, and that's time that you take out from having academic impact or writing papers for journals. So that's one of the things I've been struggling with, and I'm still trying to kind of survive, so to say, because I have a deadline, and probably those of you who are doing PhDs or are already doctors have been also facing. What I've been doing also is invest a lot of time in finding the connections between co-design and agile, because I think that's not explored, and there's a kind of co-creation setting or approach in different, not only in research, basically in workflows, in companies, in many places. Let me check the time, because maybe it's not, 40 seconds. So I'm struggling a little bit with finding this kind of common pattern, and I'm kind of at the end of the journey, and I'm still with this big question on the table. I think I have enough data for trying to argue that, or trying to demonstrate that co-creation has different lines or different possibilities of co-working or embedding collaboration in research processes. And one side will be very agile when you are in the middle of the research process and adopt these approaches from software development. That's one side or one way of understanding co-creation. And previous to that, co-design and building things with other actors, with other people that are informing the research. Okay, it's also possible and a part of the co-creation process. Yeah, so those are my 2 cents. Who wants to be next?
I've got no notes, so I'm just talking off the top of my head. So my name is Fern Edwards. I am a researcher at RMIT Europe here in Barcelona. I used to work on a project called Share City, and it was based out of Trinity College, Dublin. We looked at food sharing practices in cities. Okay, breathe. Now I am running a work package here from Barcelona, but it's on a Horizon 2020 Innovation Action Grant, and it's called EdiCitNet. So we're looking at establishing an edible cities network across the world. It's based on principles of co-creation and all sustainable urban and governance aspects that we're trying to pull together at the moment. And without my notes, we have 34 international partners. I'm working across 13 cities, and we have 9 work packages. So it's a really massive, big project that goes for 5 years. Basically, my goal at the moment as a researcher, but also sort of helping put the governance infrastructure in place, is to look at how sustainable urban governance can work and how we can put together city teams to help have more social inclusion. So governance for social inclusion is my goal right now. And so I'm trying to establish representative groups to include people on edible cities solutions. So it's a step up from nature-based solutions. And so what we're interested in looking at is more the social aspects as well as the environmental and the circular economy aspects of bringing food practices into cities and how we can share that knowledge from front-runner cities to follower cities. And then we're establishing more of an international network out from there. So I suppose what I'd love to learn from people in this room is the different governance techniques, approaches, principles, and strategies that we can develop within the governance guidelines, but also then to sort of bring into our research and to understand what some of the limitations, gaps, potentials, and what we can build on from other networks and from other projects like this. So I'll keep it really short because I haven't got any notes here, but thank you.
No, just shout at me. I'll try not to waffle on. Hi, my name's Sara. I'm from the Open Data Institute. So we are a not-for-profit, essentially sort of like a think and do tank, which sounds awful, but anyway, we're based in London. I've been asked to stress that we are kind of more an open and data organization. So we think about all types of open, including open source, open government, open culture, and we think about all types of data. So that includes open data, shared data, and other types of like forms of agreements and structures. I'm going to talk briefly about the stuff we've done in the past that's relevant to shared cities, and then talk about a project we've got coming up in the future. I'm working on an R&D program that's halfway through. It's a 3-year program funded by Innovate UK. On this program, we've done some interesting stuff on things like peer-to-peer accommodation. So we interviewed a range of stakeholders to understand the role of data in monitoring and regulating the impact of peer-to-peer accommodation platforms. So we looked at things like Inside Airbnb and contrasted that with DNA, which is the same thing but aimed at investors. So we had some recommendations coming out of that around what national and local governments can do, essentially, to get data out of the platforms and into the hands of people who would be interested in understanding those impacts and forming policy to regulate them. I think the other thing that we do that's really important is we do a lot of work on data access models. So one of the, if you can imagine, a lovely slide with a visual. One of the things we did was like a visual creation process where we clustered different types of data access. So everything from shared agreements to data marketplaces to more kind of commons-based approaches like cooperatives. The thing we've decided to focus on that has a lot of heat at the moment in the UK are data trusts. The ODI is taking kind of the view that that is a legal entity, and we're actually, I think, the main organization in the UK that's actually piloting data trusts. So we're working with the Greater London Authority to pilot a data trust that can handle smart lamppost data. The most important thing, though, that's coming up is next year we have a project on smart cities, essentially, and different approaches to them. What we would like to do is work with UK cities to have a framework to help them understand how to build an open, innovative data infrastructure. So that's open in the sense of data, but also open in the sense of processes and in terms of understanding the kind of social and economic impacts that can happen. So super relevant being here. Anyone who can help us understand the different approaches that cities across the world have taken to things like data structures, data platforms, how citizens are engaged. Obviously, we've learned a lot about Barcelona from me being here, but we'd really love to engage with anyone else who works on anything like that. Yeah, that was really well timed. Awesome, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry, one thing that we forgot when we presented the book is that we also giving books to speakers, and you are also one. You got one already? And do you? Yeah, you also got one. Okay, sorry. Who wants to be next? You, Guillaume? Okay. We have more copies. Take it as an extra motivation. But if you present it, then you read it first, because I give it to you and you have more time to read it.
So good afternoon, everyone. So I presented an initiative this morning, but this is not directly linked with that. I'm a PhD candidate in sociology at Paris Dauphine University, so in Paris. And my research topic is the platform cooperativism movement. So what I try to figure out is who are those people who are trying to build platforms and a network of platforms around fair practices in the sharing economy. And how do they do to do it right? What are the features of these platforms in terms of organizational models, in terms of financial models? And I'm also trying to find out who are their allies to do so, like what do public authorities do regarding platform co-ops and all these alternatives, what do the unions do, and what are their relation to these platform co-ops. So, well, if you are a platform co-op and I didn't get to meet you, or if you are an actor promoting that, then I'd be really happy to meet you and to discuss. Guillaume Compin, that's my name. Yeah.
You have a copy of the book already?
No.
All right.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you. Remember to present yourself before you present the project. Okay, thanks. Your name, I mean, because we're also taking notes for the Teixidora project. So thank you, Guillaume. Yeah, of course, it can be less than 3 minutes, like you did. As much as you want, and more than 3 minutes also. We are having the timer just for...
Right. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Lucie, and I'm a PhD student at Lund University at the International Institute for Industrial Environmental Economics, IIIEE. It's a really long name. And I am working on a project called Urban Sharing, and I'm working together with 6 other researchers. So we have 2 PhDs, soon to be 3, 2 postdocs, and 3 senior researchers. And our project focuses on 3 things. We are researching the practices of sharing organizations. So we have a team that looks at the environmental effects of sharing. We look at consumer behavior and how consumer behavior changes when people join sharing platforms. This is quite a long process, but we'll do that by looking at doing an input-output analysis. Because every dollar that's spent has an environmental impact, so we can track where the money goes. Then we also look at the types of sharing organizations that emerge in different cities. And finally, we look at the institutionalization pathways of sharing. We do case studies in 7 different cities. So we have something called mobile research labs, and we travel to those cities and try to figure out what is going on. So we have been to Berlin, London, and San Francisco, and we are gonna go to Seoul, Melbourne, Toronto, and Amsterdam. I hope I'm not missing anything. And so in these cities, we go there. We send 1 researcher for 1 month, and then the rest of the team comes, and we spend 7 days. And we basically try to figure out what is happening in there, what kind of organizations emerge, and how do cities react to this new development. So we have 1 paper that looks at the governance of we call it urban sharing. And we looked at there are different modes that cities can take. They can govern by regulation, which has been talked about a lot today. They can also govern by provision, by either giving money or space or other tangible resources to organizations that they want in their city and that might help them with their sustainability issues. And they can also govern by enabling. So these are soft practices that you could promote as a city. You could promote certain types of sharing. Certain types of sharing by, for example, putting the organization on their website. So next step, what we are going to do is, what now I'm working on is the institutionalization of sharing, and we look at institutional work of sharing organizations and how they work to become institutionalized.
A copy of the book? You have one?
I already have one, thank you.
You already have one. Okay, you want to be next? Thanks. Please, just a reminder to mention your name and surname when you present. And I said researchers, but I will mean people doing research. So if someone doesn't feel comfortable with the researcher label, but you're doing research for other, not necessarily the academia, please also, like you, okay, then good.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Julia Wolny, and until very recently, I was working at the University of Southampton in the UK as a researcher and principal fellow, associate professor, you could say. And so since then, I have moved to Barcelona. So I'll be reading your book very attentively, and particularly the last chapter about the history of the collaborative economy here, because that's one of the reasons that attracted me here to this city. And so you may have heard of University of Southampton. One of the links that we have with this scene, I guess, is the Web Science Institute and the digital economy sector, which is the kind of foundation of the research that I'm doing. So my interest is in the experience design in the high technology, so innovation, digital innovation, and experience design within that space that's responsible. And my background is in creative and cultural sector. So this is the kind of niche, you could say, that I'm researching. And currently, I'm doing this under the label of New Way Smart Things, which is an organization I set up to kind of umbrella organization for all the different projects I'm involved in. That tend to be in the retail sector, museum currently, and publishing. So looking at how technology is changing the way users interact with products and processes within those sectors. And particularly looking at how we can make something a lot more collaborative, more useful for all the different stakeholders existing there. And thinking back, actually a lot of the conversation made me think back to my PhD, where I was looking at mass customization and collaboration, and that was almost 13 years ago. So we have some of the themes that are coming through over and over again, and it's really interesting to know if anyone's doing any research historically about how these terms and practices have changed over the last 10, 15 years. That would be super interesting for me to talk to you. And the other kind of call out is for any projects that are looking to become more market ready, because my background is very much in the marketing kind of design of experiences. So one of the things that I'm doing with some of the projects that I'm working with is making sure that there is something that we can put out into the market, not just get more and more funding, but actually find something that's sustainable commercially. So it'll be great to speak to you about your projects. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Nuria. I'm a journalist and a researcher. I'm collaborating with DIMMONS, and I'm working from the Institute of Govern and Políticas Públicas from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. And I would like to reflect on broadcast and the radio spectrum as a commons, because broadcast still be the main mass media. Of course, internet is growing on impact, but at this moment, TV and radio are the most penetrating media, and there are a lot of communities organizing around the commons principles. In my PhD, I could demonstrate how many of the so-called free and community radio and TV stations are managing under the Ostroms and Mayo Fuste principles on governing the commons. And I would like my action research is because I would like to, this media could be considered as a urban common. For instance, what I'm wondering, what can do sharing cities concerning this media? For instance, they could consider the anthems, the equipment, even the payment of the signal transmission as a urban commons. Barcelona City Hall is developing a framework to regulate the urban commons with a figure which is public, a public property, but under a community management. And I think the media equipment could be considered this part of urban commons. And also reminding that United Nations state that the radio spectrum is a public domain, so maybe cities could consider the Hertzian waves as a part of the city's territory, which has to be planned according to the local needs, not the big corporation like Telecinco and the main broadcast means. So it is very important that cities have sovereignty in the Hertzian waves and the Hertzian space. I, in my PhD, I also could demonstrate how the state is not only inefficient, but in the practice is banning and prohibiting the freedom of expression. We are talking about the human rights. Here in Barcelona, we have a TV station with a fine of 600,000 euro. A fine that an association cannot afford, and we are talking about people who is making news of interest for the city, and they are going punished. So I think sharing cities should have a compromise in respecting the right of access to the information in the city.
You have a copy of the book already? Or not? Yeah, I have it. All of you have a copy of the book. I don't know if, okay, they are here, and before leaving the session, please take one copy for you if you don't have it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dafni Mangalousi. More closer, okay. I'm from Greece, but I do a PhD at the University of Leicester in the UK. My PhD is about the construction of European smart cities, and I use the quotation marks there because I follow a discourse perspective primarily. I'm looking at discourse and the language used, but not the language as practice and the language as political tool used in the European Union policy making first, and then I look at the case studies of Amsterdam and Barcelona, which is why I'm here today as well, like trying to bring together the local level and the European, but also global level, because in terms of, when I started doing this, I started from the European Union policy making, and there in the discourse, you can definitely see all the layers coming up, the city level, the response to the crisis, the global level, the cooperation and the competition coming up. And so I'm interested to see how this interaction is used in the local level, in the case studies of Barcelona and Amsterdam, but also like do a bit of comparative analysis, but not really per se in comparative analysis. Like more, my research approach is quite subjective, like but presented in an objective, acceptable way, I guess. So, like, participating in this event is also part of it, because I'm not interested just in discourse, but also the material implications that discourse have. So I'm following this in a timeline of since 2010, let's say. So it's a kind of like continuous process. And only this year I'm kind of like I've been here. I went to Brussels in the European Week of Regions and Cities, and I went to Amsterdam in the We Make the City festival. And now there are like more activist kind of like meetings. Yeah, to see like how what the difference and similarities in discourse in different, like from the context of policy, which is just a paper published somewhere, and this is what I see, to how that's talked about, or whether it is talked about in a more material sort of way. Yeah, that's it.
You have a copy of the book? All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, good. So hi, my name is Daniel Hayes. In a previous life, I was an MD, PhD, doing medical stuff, research, but I left all that. And now I'm part of a group working on a project called Vidalia. I have some flyers in Spanish, so you can. And basically what we're trying to do is we're building a model to create resilient, happy, compassionate, fair, and sustainable small and medium-sized communities. And we're doing that on a practical level in the sense that we've rented a mill town an hour outside of Barcelona, which has around 110 houses, a church, a school, a 10,000 square meter factory, about 8.5 hectares of agricultural land. And we have what's called a masoveria urbana contract, so it's a work for rent contract to reestablish protect and rehabilitate the cultural heritage, which is the mill town. And we're hoping to build a community there that's based on a cooperative model, una cooperativa integral with various cooperative branches, looking at alternative governance styles, currently most interested in the sociocracy 3.0, and very open, looking here for collaborators, for people wanting to, giving feedback on this process, on the agricultural part, on the governance part, on the economy part. We're looking for a sharing economy. We're integrated into the local alternative currency, which is the Bona Hora from the Eco Charchada Albages y Moyanes. And also interested in people more from an academic background that might be curious to have a playground to try their models in. So that's us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting, no, that you open also this category of a place where to do research, or I think you're offering also your project to people interested in observing and learning from it. So I think there's also an invitation for those of you who want to join these short presentations. And after that, we will move to the second part, which we're preparing some snacks there, and I have a question for you, for all of you, and let's decide how we finish the meetup.
So, hi everyone, my name is Federico. I'm from Italy, and today, Federico Piovesan, for those taking notes. And today I'm representing Openpolis, which is a foundation based in Italy, and a project that we're currently prototyping and that we're hoping to develop into a participatory laboratory starting early next year. And so it's sort of an action research project because we hope to have this laboratory of more or less 10 events and possibly between 20 to 30 participants that will work with us both in investigating, reflecting, and taking action. And the main idea of the laboratory is that we want to base our first actions on the GDPR, and one of the articles of the GDPR that allows users to request their data back from apps. And so we want to explore a bit on an individual, firstly, on an individual level, why the people taking part into the laboratory should care about companies holding their data, what data these companies actually hold, and what do you get back when you make such a request? Are they the same? And maybe also trying to imagine how these companies are extracting value from our data. And then shifting the perspective to a more collective one, and see if these data requests could be used to build bases to imagine what other actors could reuse this data and whether this information can do impact the communities we're living in. And finally, test by interacting and engaging both with the companies and local governments whether these type of actors would be willing to dialogue and explore possibility to create, let's call them, some digital data commons. So we hope this lab to be a place of experimentation and of mutual learning, and where together we try and investigate both these tools that we have at hand, like the GDPR. Is it really that easy to use? What does it give us back? But also like understand better the ecosystem and the impact that all data collection, extraction, and so on are having on our communities. And just to close, we work in a very open way, both in terms of sharing our results, but especially in terms of sharing our methodologies and tools. So if you're interested or know anyone who's doing something similar, please get in touch.
You have a copy of the book?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Monica Bernardi from the University of Milano Bicocca, Department of Sociology and Social Research. And during my PhD, I deepened the topic of the urban governance model. So probably we have something to say after. And I look how the public administration, which type of model of urban governance model the public administration can implement in order to integrate the services and practices of the sharing economy in their city in order to improve the quality of life of the citizens. And now I want, this is the PhD now, during my research fellow period, I want to like enlarge the gaze, widen the gaze, because it's important, in my opinion, to switch from the concept of sharing economy to that of sharing paradigm. And so look not just to the more profit-oriented practices, but look to all the more relational and social action activities that come from the collective intelligence of the community, and so find a way to support the civic engagement of people in this scenario. So this is the first step. The second one, in order to enlarge the scale, to make this scale jump, is that to not look just to cities, that of course is very important, but we have realized in this day that these networks that are coming up are really important in order to share experiences and good practices. Okay, I'm sorry. Better? Okay, I'm sorry. So the idea is that to study how these networks are growing up and look to this nudging group of people that are able to connect public administration with all the other actors and within other public administration. This is the concept to connect the bees and the trees that is from the social innovation literature. And so I want to study, of course, all the actors that I have the pleasure to meet in these days, and so study the Sharing City Alliance, the Sharing City Summit, Share Japan also, and so move, because during my PhD I did the case of Seoul and Milan. So look to the Asian cities, because today they are really interested not just in the more economic dimension, so they are moving from an idea of smart city that is strictly technological, and we can see the pavilion of China and so on, is really based on infrastructure, to a new tendencies that try to connect with citizen and put the citizen at the core of their policies in the frame of social innovation, in the bigger frame of social innovation. So I'm working on this in this frame. Thank you.
You have a copy of the book? You want one? Thank you. Thank you. Want to be next?
Sí, soy yo. ¿Ya va? Gracias. Hello, my name is Esther. I'm coming from the Charles University of Prague. I'm PhD on sociology. I just finished my PhD like 2 weeks ago, so I feel really happy because of that. And my research was on looking at the sharing economy from a historical point of view and also sociological, because 4 years ago we realized that there were no studies about the history or the foundations of the sharing economy. And I was really interested in looking at those things that happened in the past that made form or shape the sharing economy as we know it today. So basically the idea was to construct like a timeline in which we were placing like different important events. So at the end we can see this development of the sharing economy. We took as a reference, as a starting point, the 90s. So, because we were doubting where to place the starting point, and then we decided to start from the digital transformation as something like a main driver of the sharing economy. And while building this timeline, we were focused on 3 main points. The first one was the digital transformation. So basically, we look at those first or early platforms where we were able to share things, like Napster. The second driver was the 2008 financial crisis, in which we saw that there was a really important point in the sharing economy. Since 2008, many important platforms were launched. And the third point was also more from a sociological perspective, like the way ownership was replaced by access. So we were studying how new generations prefer to have access to stuff rather than to buy physical things. So from these 3 drivers, we were trying to somehow construct the foundations or the history, the short history of the sharing economy, like year by year, telling the readers how this process was evolving. And yeah, this research is over, but the idea is to continue documenting year by year how is this sharing economy evolving, and how from this initial sharing economy now we can see many variants and different digital platforms and platform cooperativism and many, many different variants. So hopefully I will be able to continue with this research. And yeah, I think that's basically all. Thank you. Gracias. Muchas gracias. Gracias.
So other people doing research that wants to explain it in 3 minutes for this first part of the meetup. More volunteers, okay. I hope it was useful also for getting a little bit to know more or less what the others are doing, because that can, of course, make more connections. And this is a meetup that, as I said at the beginning, we thought about this opportunity of meeting each other and getting to know the different visions on research and the collaborative economy of many of you have been sharing. So we have more or less half an hour, 45 minutes. We had a couple of ideas, and depending on how you see it, we can basically decide how to set the space. One possibility will be to make a kind of round, move the table so we can have a conversation where we basically throw more questions and answer them by what we consider. I think many things have been here mentioned in terms of methodology, what we share as more or less, many of us, as what this space represents, no? In terms of what's the real sharing or collaboration economy as compared to the smart and the gadget economy. Let me simplify things a lot. I think this deserves, of course, research, but this deserves also discussion. So if you like the approach, we can simply move the space, create a big round, and we keep on using the mic, because otherwise we won't hear each other, and more people can, of course, hear what we're saying, but this is the kind of challenge we have here. It is an open space. And then when we finish that, we have some snacks there. We can move, if you want, to this more distributed this conversation. So let's make the circle here. Okay. El micrófono, ya sirve. Okay, not bad for a kind of improvised circle. It's more like ellipses, so I don't know what's the word in English, but if we see each other, I think it's fine. And I don't want to moderate this as far as we share the questions as we've been sharing the presentations. I do have one, but after that, please use it as a research space. So let's take the benefit of having mutual interest. In my case, it's basically a question I have about what do you consider it's the type of data that you are gathering or you've been working with, and to what extent you think this can be open. I think, you were this morning in some sessions we had about open data and data commons, and that's one of our main questions right now at DIMMONS. We want to create a platform where researchers, public administration, and also social projects, for business or not, for profit or not, can share some data and create these data commons. But that raises lots of questions, of course, about privacy and about researchers' positions and what's your data in front of someone else's data, in order to publish and so on. So who wants to take the mic? We take this mic as the kind of ball we can send to each other. I will, if no one raises the hand, I will send the mic to someone, basically. Yeah, thanks.
I can answer that because, I don't know, most of my data are kind of in my head, really. The methodology and the way I do the analysis is just synapses and connecting ideas and from the things that I read and from the places that I go in my head. And then these become real in my writing when I haven't written my chapters yet. So when I would write the chapters, these will be sort of, I don't know, the data I can share as well. I do have notes, handwritten notes and stuff like that, but I kind of I don't know if this would make sense to anyone else. So in my case, that's kind of
so unsurprisingly, the Open Data Institute tries to do everything as openly as possible. It's been a bit of an adjustment for me. This is a relatively new job, but I have been working in policy for a few years. I think what's interesting about our processes is all the thinking we do is in the open. So that reflects the values I was talking about, that for us, it's not just about the data we share, it's about the kind of thinking. It's about the thing. I'm having restricted access here to the... we share Google Docs when we're developing policy reports, for example, when we're developing our, even research frameworks before we go and collect data. They are often put out there to the public. So we're constantly producing outputs through a research project so we can get feedback from as wide a community as possible. So I'd encourage you guys to go to our website and sort of follow our blogs, because that's a really good way of engaging with our research process. The other thing is the kind of more technical parts of what the Institute does. We work kind of directly with organizations that have sources of data and help them open them. So there's a lot of technical expertise within the institution that I don't have, but that other people do have around how you go about that whole process. From coming up with some kind of standard so that lots of different organizations can use it, through to like anonymization. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, let me know. I can put you in contact with people who can tell you more.
Regarding your comment, for instance, in my case, I wanted to track some websites, and they were super close to give you the information. So in my case, I wanted to know how many clicks they get per month, those websites. And sometimes, they are not going to give it to you. There are some other websites that do this tracking, but normally you have to pay for that. So in my experience, it's like they are super close. They are not going to give you data. So either you pay for it or it's going to be so difficult. So in my case, finally I found a website that I can share with you that you have to pay, but there is one option that if you do it 1 month by month, you can do it manually, so you can count or you can get that tracking. But normally, if you want to get it automatically, you have to pay for those things. So it will be great, since we are all talking about open source and open data and stuff like that, that those companies or those platforms can allow people to see those data. But I think today it's not happening. It's not really happening.
All right, so this is more benchmarks or blueprints for how other projects that I've seen have been using this. And one distinction to make is whether it's data for research or whether it's data from research, whether it's like input or output. In terms of the input, one of the blueprints that I would recommend to look at is Hub of All Things, which is HAT from University of Warwick. And they are creating, they've already created and funded a platform that is about pulling data from personal repositories, such as your own Spotify history or anything like that, or financial history, putting it into a marketplace and then being able to share it or sell it. So that's a really interesting one for understanding how data can be used for, both kind of sharing it on that basis. And then when it comes to the output, one of the projects I would encourage you to look at is Digital Methods from University of Amsterdam. And so they're very good at sharing the outputs of what they do in a very digestible way. So have a look at that, maybe.
More reflections or experiences about, and it's a good point, no? Data for research or data from research. Bad experiences, mistakes, and learnings, or some things you want to try out? Yeah.
Another point to reflect on is concerning the academia data, no? The platforms where we are sharing our research. For instance, the Catalan government holds an agreement with academia, which is a corporate enterprise, and encourage universities to encourage the researchers to publish on academia. And in my university, there were talks encouraging the researchers to use Twitter and Facebook. And I think this is an important point to agree where we are publishing our results. And also another point is the business of the editorial industry, academic editorial industry. I think as another important thing, we as our researchers compromise with sharing economy, we should do something relating to that.
Yeah, you are opening several questions, and maybe we can follow them if you want also. Touching the publication system could be one. How we use social media tools, or how we use the internet to have impact beyond the academic world, so to say. I think that's also an important topic. And, okay.
I have a question maybe for everyone regarding GDPR and how you conduct interviews, because we have a research grant from ERC, and then when we go and do interviews, we must have a form that and the interviewees sign this. For some people, when you go and make them sign a piece of paper that this information will be used in research, most people are okay with that. Some people are like, oh no, I don't want to sign anything. And I was wondering if anyone has any experience with that.
Yeah, we'll add to your question because it's not an answer, it's an additional question, no? That when you create some settings, playing more with co-design or being more action researcher, well, there's also specific limits or specific barriers, to be coherent with that. Yeah, so that's my short addition to the question. Yeah, more things or new ones as a meetup and as an open mic session. I would like us to, some of you are taking notes of some of the resources that have been mentioned, and I would like someone that hasn't talked yet also to take the mic. You may not have present, but you may have a question or something to bring to the space as researcher or someone that does research around the sharing economy. Not yet, not around here.
Another point is another different question, but also the PhD. The PhD has to be authored by one person. And we are in a collaborative sharing area. So also, for me, it's very strange, because I'm in with 1 feet in each territory. And yeah. I don't know if...
Okay. Any experience beyond being co-authors, like with the level of collaboration you're doing in a European project that has some research part? What's your, experience with that? What's the kind of, good sides and bad sides of, because I think it's what also you're mentioning, the collaboration beyond the co-authorship and how this is very challenging.
Yes, actually I work alone. And I really feel this status as something not very inspiring because I'm always with me. So yes, encourage research group. I think that can be very useful. I don't know, probably we need more economic support from institutions in order to favor the research on this topic in a collaborative way, encouraging also transversal group. This is a difficult point because people coming from different backgrounds don't used to publish together because there is a problem in terms of sector in which your article will be published. And if I work with co-designer, for example, we want to publish on 2 different review journals. And this is a problem because we can have common work, common research, but it's not something that is encouraged because someone will not happy for the journal that will publish the article. I don't know if you agree with this point.
Yeah, I'm working with the team, so we are 6 people, and it's really easy to find someone to collaborate with. But I also see that lots of people are working on their own, and there is one event that I think is really good. And I don't think I've seen any of you there, but it's called the International Workshop on the Sharing Economy. And it's for researchers. It takes place every year. I think the first one was in Paris, then Southampton. Then we organized the 4th. I don't know, there was one more. Then we organized the 4th one in Lund in Sweden. Then this year it was in Mannheim. And next year I think it's going to be in the Netherlands. And I think this is a really good platform for researchers on the sharing economy to meet and find people to collaborate with. So International Workshop on the Sharing Economy.
I was wondering who organized this kind of workshop, because it can be useful, as we said before, use social networks and create maybe some groups of researchers working on this topic that sometimes cross academic events, but sometimes cross other type of events like this one, and be always in contact using simply, I don't know, a Facebook page, for example, a Facebook group, something like this, with the organizer.
So every year it's different. When we organized it in Lund, it was our project that organized it, and it was free for everyone to attend. There was even free lunch and everything. The one in Mannheim, I think there was a small fee to cover the cost, but it was also organized by the Mannheim team. They have a sharing project which just finished something, I don't remember the name, but it's usually research institutes and research projects.
Just to add a little bit to the collaborative work and creating opportunities. So one of the things I've been doing recently is organizing panels at international conferences. And so we just basically put a call out for something of interest. And so we did that at the European Association for Social Anthropologists conference. And so I co-ran a panel there on food, the senses in the city. And then because we established these are with complete strangers who I sort of met online, we had the same interests, we work well together. And so then we put in another co-panel for the CIF conference, which I never remember what that stands for, but in Santiago de Compostela next year. But through there, then we put the call out to everybody else. And so then we're developing this network of scholars around the world who can come to the conferences, because we don't have the funding to support them, because it's an independent other project outside of work. It's just my interest. And from there, we started developing co-editing books. And so it's a really nice way to sort of work with people if they can get funding somehow through their own institutions. But in terms of working with other people and beginning to co-create articles in your interest area. So it mightn't necessarily be the sharing economy, but it could be. And so it's just a way of sort of putting it out there and getting more involvement across different institutions that you wouldn't normally meet. A lot of those conferences also have study groups or, bodies of interest. And so I've joined like the IIIEE conference. There's a food group, and I'm actually part of another group that's now setting up an urban focus because that wasn't there. So now we're working with people to do that across Europe. And then on top of that, because of the project I'm working in now, which is more, we work very much with city councils, I work with universities across the world, and I work with community groups, and I also work with business. So it's very much across stakeholders. And because I'm putting the governance infrastructure together for that group, it's a different form of collaboration again, because we need to talk to people to understand what terms mean across these different sectors. And so that's another way of sort of getting together and talking. And we're just doing that through interviews and conversations. But understanding where we're all coming from, and that becomes its own research thing again, because you're establishing a new base of understanding so you can move forward on whatever that project is. So just some different ways of sort of collaborating across institutions across Europe, but also across sectors.
Sorry, I never want to dominate a conversation. Yeah, I guess just off the back of that, as someone who's not part of an academic institute, I'd just make a plea for you guys to kind of keep an eye out for, spare a thought for us poor researchers that are kind of working on much shorter term projects, much shorter term, so 3 to 6 months, if we're lucky sometimes, and aren't as plugged into networks, are trying to process huge amounts of multidisciplinary information, but who can provide, because we do often work more with policymakers, political decision makers, community groups, we have more expertise in how to talk to those groups and how to influence those groups and how to sort of, and this certainly the last organization I worked with, and ODI to a certain extent, are quite experienced in terms of co-creation. So our kind of skill set tends to be a bit different. The experience I've had kind of interacting with DIMMONS has been really refreshing. It's been, I felt really welcomed into this research community. That isn't always the case. So yeah, I'd be interested like how we can get more of that going, given we often are in institutions with incredibly different funding structures and timescales. I think that's what the barrier is, to be honest. It's not will. You know, people want to collaborate, but there's that difference.
I would just want to add to that it's kind of like my experience in the department I've been has been very similar to yours, just because of my topic was kind of like not connected to the topics of other researchers within the department. And like this alienation that it's just that something that happens, I think, because of what you were saying, sort of the structure of academia in itself at the end of the day. So it's an extra effort for those who want to take it one step further. It's a personal extra effort that it needs to have. It's not structural, like from departments to schools. And so if you want like groups like that are still like very important. But when you're not physically in the, like, for example, in Barcelona, like you can have a 1 day or 3 days refreshing experience, but then you have to go back to where you are. And I think that's another problem, a layer of the problem, I guess.
Do we have time? Okay. I will just like to add regarding what you said. There is also one research community that is called Research Network on the collaborativeeconomy.com. If you go there, we normally share a lot of information on the website, but to me the most important thing is if you go to a tab that says, I think is Meet Your Peers, there you will find many channels in which we use to share information about research and the sharing economy. Normally we share things on Facebook. We have a mailing list. If you put your email, you will get emails not so often, like once a month or something like that, but still really interesting, in which we share like call for papers, research positions, postdocs, PhD things. And also, for instance, if you get any finding, you can put it there and everybody will get it. So it is really easy to share things. It is for academia and for non-academia, so everybody is welcome to just join those Facebook groups, Twitter, LinkedIn, and this mailing list. So it's really simple. And it's really simple to share just what you have. Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, it is Research Network on the collaborativeeconomy.com. If I'm not mistaken, it should be that one.
Yeah, I would like to add that also from DIMMONS and the Sharing Cities Alliance and how this project is evolving, we are also hoping to contribute, and we invite you to do it with us, and in parallel to what we do, to this kind of continuing this conversation, because I think that more or less from different perspectives we are all also interested in this main topic of sharing in cities and for and from cities, no? And I think there's an opportunity, a window of opportunity for being during 1 year until the next summit that I don't know exactly where it's going to be, to reflect on what we're doing and connect the dots of what we're doing. So I think that from DIMMONS we can offer this kind of connection point for right after this event, and then see what's the best channel for when we are not together. Okay. Time-wise, I would like to make sure that we don't forget or not mention anything that might be of your interest, like a last call for a topic or question that you consider is important. Because I have the impression that in conferences, sometimes when the session finishes and you wake up and start to approach the people you'll be hearing talking, it's also an important part, and maybe the 20 minutes we have, we can basically do that, no? Like stand up, and while we had some snacks there, and then be more distributed in the conversation that we may want, or the connection we may want to do after this round. Mayo?
No, I just a small announcement. just to, that in DIMMONS we are part of the WOC University, and it has doctoral and postdoctoral grants. So if you want to come to Barcelona, think about applying them and join the team.
So yeah, some more questions for us and the rest around us, or we just switch to the more close discussions. Okay.
I was this Juliana seminar organized by the International Association of the Commons, and most of the sessions were concerning natural commons. My topic was not, but I felt so comfortable. So I felt more comfortable than if I go to a communication international association when people speak about corporate media, and I'm the strange things there. So I think we could also link moving to a transdisciplinary way of thinking. I think we have a lot of similarities and commonalities with this association to have it in mind. And also with Curriculum Global, which emerged from the social forum in Porto Alegre, and are researchers interested on solidarity economy. I'm part of it, and it is centered on traditional, non-digital, or at least digital has not a big space, a big room there. And I think we are the same. And sometimes the digital component is a kind of barrier, disconnecting the solidarity, the traditional solidarity and the new. And it's very important to keep together because we are doing the same.
So it's okay for you? No, okay, more questions? I know there were more things.
Just a short comment that might seem a bit far away from what we're talking, but I don't know if you share that thoughts with me. We're all researching models that are trying to be more horizontal, that trying to be different from the neoliberal capitalist state of economics and society that we're in. But our institutions and the way we're producing knowledge is still very top-down. Even when we co-author, when we publish in academic language in academic journals that reach basically no one but us, how can we actually change also formats? How can we credit the people that we are researching for them not to just be an anonymized name in a PhD thesis or in papers? And I think we also have a responsibility in terms of thinking about how we change the way we produce knowledge.
Not to you only. So if we can basically put the chairs back how they were, because there's another presentation at 5, and I was talking about the snacks, it's only some, sorry, I thought it was bigger, so I'm sorry for putting too much emphasis on the snacks, but yeah, we put it back as it was, and there's a next session coming in 15 minutes.